Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today I have Miranda Clark on with me. Hey Miranda, how are
Hey,
you?
good. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you. Okay, you and I are going to have such a fun conversation because we have we do very similar things. So we're both
Yeah.
therapists and we both work with couples, but we do it a little bit differently. So
Mhm.
I have so much that I want everyone to learn about you, and I have a lot that I want to talk to you about. So let me just start off by letting you introduce yourself properly, and then we will jump into our conversation. Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, where you are, and all the things.
All right. Yeah. So I live in Oregon, so south of Portland, kind of in the wine country, which has been really fun. I live with my husband, who's my high school sweetheart. So we've been married for a very long time, and we have two beautiful daughters. Actually, one of our daughters, her birthday is today. So
Oh,
she's
yay.
turning 7, and then our oldest is 9. She'll be turning 10 next month. So we recently acquired a puppy and black lab. She's about 7 months, so she's
Oh,
entering
good.
like crazy teenage awful stage.
Hmm.
So that has been a fun challenge. I have been in private practice for 12, I think about 13 years now. So
Wow.
it's flown by so quickly.
Yeah,
I see mostly couples, but I also have a handful of individuals as well.
I love that. And so, how did you kind of get into working with couples? What drew you to that?
Yeah, it's so funny. In graduate school, if somebody had told me, like, Miranda, you're gonna primarily focus with couples, I'd be like, oh, no way. That sounds awful. My desire was to work with kids and teenagers. And so I took all of my credits and I had a couple of credits that I needed to finish up. And so I just kind of took some couples therapy courses and instantly fell in love with it, of like, oh my
Mhm.
God. It just kind of opened up a new area for me. So when I went into practice, I was still seeing, teenagers and kids, and had a couple of, contract work at some other agencies. But when I started seeing couples, I noticed that I was so much more energized after the end of the session. I was like, okay, there's clearly this is where I'm meant to go. And I was particularly interested in relationships after having kids. And this was before I knew, Gottman does this whole, bringing baby home workshop and all of this. And I was like, this is really important to me. And I had a family member tell me, like, well, you don't even have kids. So why do you feel like you want to do this? Like, you have no idea. To which I said, like, well, I don't know if I necessarily need to be like assaulted to help a client work through trauma of assault, but
Yep.
okay. And then found the Bringing Baby Home program, started really doing a lot of research around, how relationships change. Even like the best relationships suffer a huge decline after the arrival of baby. And I was like, all right, I'm hooked. This is what I want to do. I love it.
Wow, I love that. Okay, tell us the fun story of you and your husband being high school sweetheart.
Oh, oh gosh. Well, I think the only reason why we're probably together is because the first day of junior year, I was actually with somebody else at the time. We didn't start dating until senior year, but um I arrived late to our US history class, and we just sat in the seats that were of course in the front row, and me and my best friend. And then a couple of minutes later, these two guys just like showed up super late, and they had to sit right next to us. That was like the worst seats possible. And then after everyone was sat down, the teacher was like, okay, this is your seats for the entire year. And we're like,
Oh,
no. And he was one of them. And so, initially it was not somebody that I would probably like go for. But like that friendship and started, and then it was just we started dating and just best friends ever since. So
I love
um
that.
yeah. So
How
we've
long have you been married?
let's see. We got married in 2006. So
Yeah,
ma-
what,
I think we
8,
just
17?
celebrated
Yeah,
our
we don't do that.
yeah,
We
we
don't
just
do math.
celebrated I think our 18 year. I don't know, something like
Nice.
that. But
I love that. I love that.
mhm.
Okay, so it's I'm really, really interested in our conversation today because so much of what I do now is I work with couples who have the baby. or have the kids, and their focus is how to readjust, like reconnect and kind of work on communication and connection. My
Yeah.
initial passion was actually, and this is why I love that we're going to have this conversation, I wanted to teach couples how to prepare for having a baby. Like you're
Yeah.
pregnant, you're about to have this
Yeah.
kid. I want you to know how to protect your marriage and
Yes.
be the best, like create the strongest foundation possible before you bring this baby home.
Hmm.
And then, because there's so many parenting resources out there, not
Yeah.
that a whole lot of people take advantage of that. I would love for more people to do that, but there isn't a lot of support created for how do you nurture and protect your marriage from
Yeah.
having a kid. And to your point, the strongest marriage will experience some, like whether it's a decline or a complete flip of your world. When you have a kid, there's just no way around it. I mean,
Mhm.
everything in your world changes. And so tell us a little bit about, I mean, most people, lay people that aren't in the therapy world won't be super familiar with Gottman, but maybe give us a little bit of just kind of the psychoeducation piece of like, what is bringing baby home? What is that program? And then let's just start talking about what you do and how you work with couples.
Yeah. So, John and excuse me, John and Julie Gottman are couples therapists, world-renowned couples therapists in Seattle. They have so much decades long of research around what makes relationships last, and have studied couples and watched their behavior, their interactions, etc. Fast forward, they've also done a lot of parent-child interactions and how incorporating some attachment, etc. And I think one of the things that they noticed with couples of who have had children is this lack of sleep, obviously, is something that we can't get around. Also, personally, in a lot of the couples that I work with, even if you have done so much personal work and growth through therapy, and you're like, okay, I've got all my triggers down, I've got all my stuff, and then you have a child, and it's almost like so much of that gets either thrown out the window, or this whole well of memories and things that just like pop up that you didn't realize that was there. Um, Also, I think, you know, couples, if we're talking heterosexual couples, will typically go into that genderedized roles really quickly, which can be very hard. If that works for you, great. But a lot of times, more women are career driven and are becoming more breadwinners. And so that makes a difficult kind of, grind in the relationship of who's doing what, household roles, childcare roles. Um,
Mhm.
Men typically fall into this like, well, I'm going to work more because that's my role. I bring home the money, you take care of the child, which then creates more separation. So yeah, there's so many different things that occur, and just to be
Yeah.
mindful of it.
Yeah. And I think that one of the maybe most common aspects of that dynamic is just that we don't have those conversations beforehand of like, what do we want our roles to be? And you can, I mean, no matter how much you plan, sometimes those change, but the planning I find doesn't happen. And I think back to like
Mm,
before we have an 11-year-old son, and we had some conversation, but we didn't even talk a lot about like, what's it going to look like when because I took, 3 months off. What's it going to look like when I go back to work?
yeah.
How are we going to manage these things? And those are so hard to navigate in the moment because you are sleep deprived. You're emotional because you might be emotional about having to go back to work, or the kids having sleep problems, or maybe for moms, there's still some postpartum going on, or
Hmm.
even just everyone trying to figure out what is their strength. And I always, try to think of, it's easier now for me to look back and be like, well, here were our strengths and here were our weaknesses. But at the time, no one was helping us navigate those conversations. We didn't know how to navigate those. So you just kind of piece it together. And
Yeah.
it was harder than it probably could have been had
Hmm.
we been prepared. And so where does your journey in working with couples, like in your ideal world, when would you get your hands on a couple to start really preparing them to bring a baby home?
Obviously, before they become pregnant, or before the plan to, acquire acquire a
Mhm.
baby, whether it's adoption or surrogacy or whatever, because it is so vitally important. We have the conversation of, oh, what is the nursery going to look like, and how we're going to decorate, and who's going to get the crib, etc. But talking about your relationship is vital, and it is beyond me the amount of couples that, first of all, don't even ask each other whether or not they want children
Mhm.
before deciding to commit to each other. But also just having the conversations of what was childhood like for you? What roles did your parents have? How is that going to affect us raising our family? So that would be ideal, like before
Mhm.
baby is, a presence.
Yes. So in reality, when are people typically reaching out to get the help from you?
I'm seeing more and more them as they're pregnant, which
Mhm.
is better.
Mhm.
Um, or the other extreme is they already have children and they've been miserable for years. So
Yeah.
it's they've started some of those negative patterns and it just became entrenched. I always use the metaphor of cross country skiing. If you've ever gone cross country skiing in a place where they have the grooves already like ready for you, it's so much easy, right? You just put your skis in the grooves and you go along and you go, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. Look at it. It's so easy, right? And
Mhm.
those are those neural pathways that we have and those, conflict triggers and the patterns that we are with our partner. And I'm always asking couples, okay, we're going to step out into the fresh snow and it's going to be hard. And you're going to look over there and you're going to see that track and you're like, oh, but it's right there and it's so easy and it's so easy to fall back into that. So yeah, it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
to get there, but the earlier the better.
Yeah, it's a beautiful analogy. And I think of the couples that I work with, whether it's in the therapy world or in the coaching world, most, and well, okay, I'm going to interrupt my own thought to tell you something. The reason that I decided, even though my passion truly was getting to parents before they even have kids, what I've learned is that until you're in pain or you're struggling, you don't know that you need the support, right? And so if
Yeah.
we were to go out there and be like what you're doing, and I love what you're doing, trying to really reach people before they have a kid, they don't realize they think very highly of themselves. Like, we're going to be
Mhm.
fine. It's fine. We have a strong relationship. We know how to talk about all these things. So they don't realize that, yeah, but all of that's going to change. Like, yes, you can find your way back to that, but at what cost, right? So in the couples that we work with that already have the kids, have been, to your point, they've been struggling for a really long time. And a really long time could be a year, it could be 20 years. Like, I mean, hell, you can be struggling for 5 months and that feels like an eternity for you because it's just a heavy,
Mhm.
dense, like, burden on your life every single day. Because I believe that if your marriage is not strong, then everything else tends to suffer.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think what you and I try to do is really help people get in as early as possible, but we don't always have that privilege. And so what we do is try to teach couples, like, it's never too late if you're willing to do the work. If you don't want to do
Mhm.
the work, then yeah, that's probably not going to work out very well for you. But if
Mhm.
you are willing to give 100%, if each person is all in, willing to do the work, we can carve that track in that
Mhm.
snow. And there are couples who have come from a place where they thought they were on the brink of divorce, but they got in there, they did the hard work, and they have the most amazing bonded, strong, connected marriage now. So there's hope. So I'm trying to think of what my question for you there.
Well, as you say that, it reminds me, it feels very similar to premarital work.
Mhm.
So much that idea of pre-marriage counseling is very normalized, and I would love to normalize like pre-child therapy or pre-child counseling too. These couples are like, oh, but we're great. We're gonna, the premarital when they come in, like, we don't fight, we never fight. And I always think like,
Mhm,
what are we
mhm,
avoiding? Or okay,
mhm.
you're going to.
Yeah, it's
um,
inevitable.
right. Yeah. You're navigating your own blueprints. Your partner has their own blueprint. And you're trying to build this house together. There's going to be differences. So
Yep.
we have to figure out how to, process through that.
Yeah. And you said something that I want to go back to. You mentioned about how you try to talk to parents about what they or pre-parents, whatever, about like what were some of the things that they experienced as children in their relationships with their parents, because so much of that can come back up and can be triggered in the
Mhm.
way that we experience parenting and our
Yeah.
relationships with our kiddos. But it's so interesting how we don't know. And again, like, it's funny when we talk, like, certain couples will come to mind, right? And I think of like the ones who have these really unexpected triggers, I guess. Like you don't realize until you're dealing with a thing
Hmm.
with your kid, whether it's your toddler or your teenager or anywhere in between, of like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. This is so hard. You don't realize that in many ways it's linked back to
Yeah.
how you were treated or how you experienced this in your own childhood. And I think there are some people that are like, ugh, to my childhood, like that's so silly. Why does everything have to go back to the childhood? And not everything does, but many things do. And so, but
Yeah.
it's more about the point of, as an individual, you're bringing your stuff into every relationship that you have. And that includes your spouse and your child. So are you in a good space to be the best version of you in this relationship? And so many of the couples that we work with don't even have the energy to consider that because
Yeah.
the day to day is so difficult. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. It's tough, and talking about some of those key things like discipline, how, you're gonna those differences in discipline can be a really big thing, but also just like the drainingness of it. What can you and your partner do? How can you create a plan when like one of you is just toast, Ideally, in a perfect world, we can say something to our partner, or a partner will recognize like, okay, it's time for me to step up. But oftentimes that can have some underlining, messages or triggers of like, "Oh, my partner's in such a bad mood." And then like, they take it personal, or it just creates this big storm that feels so unnecessary. Um,
Mhm.
so pre-planning is, and again, you can't plan for everything,
Right.
but how are we going to approach some of these like difficult things?
Yeah. And the if we're looking at couples that are in it, like you're in the trenches, you've got these kids, you're exhausted, and you're trying to figure out how to have a strong marriage. Again, it's never too late. So if we're going to go into how do you plan now? If you didn't get to do it before, you didn't have that luxury or just you didn't know to do it, and here we are today and you need help. It's amazing to me, and I am, human, guilty. Um, we it's amazing what we make time for, right?
Yeah.
What we prioritize and what we don't. And like you think of New Year's resolutions or all these personal goals that we set for ourselves, like, I want to get better at this. I want to read this many books this year. I want to work out this many times this week. I want to, run a marathon or whatever. But the marriage doesn't make it on that list very often. If you were to say, I want to dedicate an hour a week where we go out and we just spend time together. Or by the end of this month, I want us to have had this many, conversations about money or about, how we're going to handle the sleep regression with our baby or what we're going to do because we need to prepare to have the sex talk with our 12-year-old. Like
Yeah.
if we would carve out time, and I know we say, well, we don't have time. We can make time.
Hmm.
Certain things need to be prioritized. And I've worked on changing my lingo from I don't have time to I don't make time because I
Hmm.
can take responsibility for that. And I can be like, well, you're just being a brat and you're not making time. I'm really good at that. So,
Uh-huh.
what are some of the things that we would really want couples to hear now if it's like, if you need to really start making a plan because it's never too late, what are some of the basic things that we really would want someone to hear if they're listening to this?
Yeah. I think the thing that really drew it home for me is the Gottmans will say the greatest gift that you can give your child is a loving relationship between the two of you. And that really hits home because, again, so much of the focus goes on the children, which of course it's going to, they're dependent on you. And they also want to see their parents succeed and be happy and be loving. And not only that, but it creates a good boundary for them when they grow up and they have a partnership of their own. Like my partner and I, years ago, we made a commitment because we don't have family nearby, and I know a lot of people don't. So it's a lot harder to find, child support and things for watching kids. But we made a priority that every Saturday night, that is our date night. And the girls, that's their sleepover night. So they would take turns hosting sleepover in each other's rooms, and we get them like glow sticks, and they could stay up as late as they want and play whatever they want. They have their own time, and we just hang out downstairs and make dinner together or
I
watch a,
love it.
or we didn't have to go out. We didn't have to hire a babysitter. And granted, not everyone's kids are going to like that idea, but for us, it was really important. And we really set that boundary of like, nope, don't come downstairs unless it's an emergency. It's our date night. And they really, um, respect that a lot.
Mhm.
Yes, making time. I love that when you're like, I haven't made the time for it, or instead of I don't have time, because you're right. If it's important to you, you will make the time. And relationships and marriages are one of the biggest investments that we can make. And so you don't get a new car and then don't get an oil change or new tires when you need new tires. So
Yeah.
really it's maintenance. It's making sure that you're always adding to your emotional bucket and making sure that it's like ideally 3/4 of the way full, you know?
Yeah, and I love your date night thing. That is so cool because I think a lot of parents or people in general are like, well, we don't have a babysitter, that we don't want to spend the money. And it's like, well, doesn't have to be this big old thing. It could be the 10 minutes that you have from the time the kids go to bed to where you're taking a shower to where you just sit and like talk
Hmm.
about the day or just watch some funny reels on Facebook together. I don't care. Like
Yeah.
something that connects you, a board game. Like I have someone I just did an episode with said like they do Yahtzee, like it's their
Oh, we do
thing,
Yahtzee all the
right?
time. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like whatever your thing is, but you do have to get
Mhm.
creative because some people's thing is that like, well, we connect on vacation. Well, that's fantastic, but you can't do that every day. So
Right.
you have to get creative. And I think we just, to your example of the cross country skiing, they just go back into those other tracks where it's like, well, this is what we like to do to connect. And if we can't do that, then I guess we're just not connecting. It's like,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
we come up with other ideas and they may not be the like high level, we just done the most amazing connecting ever. It might be the 5%, but it sure as hell is better than the zero, right? And so,
Mhm.
but then also I think beyond just quality time, one of the things that I know in my marriage is that we have grown in so many ways as individuals. We met when I was 19. It's been 20 years,
Mhm.
right? I am not the same person at 39 that I was at 19, and he isn't at 40 that he was at 20. But we've grown, thankfully for us, because
Yeah.
we've been very intentional with being a strong couple and we've had to learn a lot along the way, but like we've grown in the same direction. But there have been so many points along the way where I'm like, I'm missing a little bit of information about where you are in your journey and work, or
Mhm.
how you're feeling about this parenting thing, or maybe you've gone through something with your friends or personally with family. And it's like, I need to get, like, I don't know what's going on as much because we haven't had the chance to talk as much, or we've kind of been too busy to do whatever. And so you have to make time to check in on like, what are the things that keep us strong? We need to be meeting each other's needs. We need to be making sure the way we're running our household is good. We need to be okay with the way we're parenting this kid. We need to be fair in the way that we manage, blah, blah, blah. And I think one of the last on the list is that meeting needs, right?
Mhm.
Are you getting what you need from me? And am I getting what I need from you? And if not, what's missing? Are we comfortable talking about what our needs are, our love languages, and all of that? And so I wish we could teach couples to have those conversations more.
Right. Yeah. And it's so simple. And I always start with couples of just give each other appreciations, like for the simplest stuff, right? Taking out the trash. Hey, thank you for taking out the trash. I get some kickback on that. A lot of
Oh
couples are
yeah.
like, well, what do you mean? Like, we do it all the time. It's just you have to do it. And it's like, yeah, but doesn't it feel nice to get that thank you? And that's
Mm.
something that my husband and I are very aware of. Like, hey, thanks for taking the kids to school. Well, obviously someone's got to do it, but like, thank
Yeah.
you, thanks for walking the crazy dog. Um, it's when we start trickling away from those, like that's when your emotional bank starts to deplete a little bit. And it's really hard to kind of, get the inertia to get it back up and running.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
It
I
is
love
the
your
small
point.
things.
Yeah, I
Go
love
ahead.
your point about like goals and dreams. I think that I'm learning now through working with a lot of couples that for me, that's such a foundation of emotional intimacy. Of if you both have dreams together, even if they're not a reality, right? My husband and I would like dream about this restaurant that we'd want to open. We even created recipes and blah, blah, blah. We knew in reality that we weren't going to open a restaurant, but it was something that we shared in together. If couples have this dream or financial goals, planning for a vacation, or what's it going to look like when the kids leave, like being on the
Mm.
same path or at least continuing to talk about it, that is such a huge area and opportunity for that emotional intimacy. Because imagine if you don't have that, you're just kind of like
Yeah.
floating around on the day to day and it doesn't feel secure or like that anchor that you
Yeah.
want.
100%. To me, I feel like emotional intimacy is very synonymous with friendship to
Mhm,
me, right? Like I love hanging out with my husband. He's my
mhm.
best friend. We have fun. Like we never run out of things to talk about. And that nurtures that emotional intimacy because it's just about I care about who you are. I'm interested in who you are. And the things that I don't have an interest in that you do, like if you watch certain things that I don't care about, we can you can do that. I'll do this over here. But if there's something about that that you're like, oh my gosh, look how cool the football, whatever. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm,
I'm still like, oh my gosh, that's so fun. I don't care. But it is
mhm.
important to him. And I've given this example before. I'm sure my listeners can hear this again for the millionth time. You don't have to care to about the thing to care that your spouse cares about the thing.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's not about the thing. It's about your
Mhm.
spouse. It's the same with kids. Like when your kids want you to sit with them and play a video game that you have zero interest in and you're probably going to suck at it, you do it anyway because that's how you
Yes.
connect and bond with your child. And so I love that you brought up emotional intimacy. And I think that it really isn't it doesn't have to be complicated. I think like and you probably can relate to this as therapists. So many couples that we work with will shelf a conversation that they need to have
Mhm.
until they can get to a counseling session because they don't know how to talk about these
Yeah.
things at home. They're scared of the conflict it'll bring up or the discomfort. And so they wait till they come into counseling. Well, then we spend all our counseling sessions talking about this thing that happened, and we're not really making progress. We're not moving forward in like the bigger, how do we do better? It's more of like, well, this hurt my feelings and I want to talk about it for an hour.
Mhm.
So, how I guess when you have couples that are stuck in the hurt, what we try to do is to move them through that, but they have to want to move through that, I guess. So, what do we do? How do we help people do that, girl?
Yeah. One of my favorite things is talking about the meta. I think couples get really scared to bring up conflict outside of a session because they don't want it to implode and then have this, have it become worse, especially people who are conflict avoidant.
Yep.
So, what I try to encourage couples to do is okay, if something hurt your feelings, but you're afraid to bring it up because of that, say, hey, I want to talk about something, but I'm afraid it's going to cause more conflict.
Mm.
That's it. Like, just even talking about this outer layer opens up for so much more emotional intimacy. And if it's too hard or you find yourself like falling down that path or that pattern, then take a pause. But even just like cracking through that first layer offers
Yeah.
like, this is where I'm at right now, but I'm fearful it's going to cause more problems or
Yeah.
more conflict. Um, yeah, so that has is really helpful, but I think other couples will tend to kind of lean back and wait. I'm sure you experience this with your couples of like if they come to couples therapy, they're going to do the work and then there's no progress and then you figure out like, oh, they're just waiting for their partner to make the first move. And I quash that from the beginning of like you are responsible for your own person. You can make changes. You can take accountability for your part in it. You have to make those steps. You cannot wait for your partner because you might be waiting
Yeah.
forever.
Absolutely. And it's like teaching a new language. Like
Yeah.
you two are not speaking the same language, and that's fine. Like lots of
Mhm.
couples go through that, whether it's a gender thing or a background thing, or you've repressed or like held in a lot of whatever. So you're not communicating in a way that really is conducive to your marriage. So we need to come up with a new language, a new um just a new structure for the way to do this. It's not about neighbors down the street and how they do it, or your sister-in-law who does it with her husband different. Like it's about you and your marriage. What is it about your marriage that you don't love right now? And what way would you say you're not where you want to be? And where do you want to be? But what is your role? And so many people, like you said, are waiting, like, well, these are my needs. And until they meet my needs, I don't see why I should blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And it's like, Okay, how's that working for you? Because you've probably been in this place for a while. And
Right.
until you are willing to completely humble yourself, do the things even without the thank you. I'm with you. And I tell my husband, the poor man, I'm very sensitive and I very much need validation on a regular basis. I'll look at him and be like, I need more, please. Like, just
Yeah.
keep it coming. Like, you can tell me 5 times,
Hmm.
appreciate. Poor guy, but we've been together for so long, he knows what I need. And vice versa. But
Yeah.
it's like I had to tell him that, like,
Yeah.
I am highly I have higher needs than the average girl. So let me educate you and help you in how to do this. But
Yeah.
when we don't do that and we just expect the other person, well, they know I need that. Why don't they just give it to me? Because there are lots of reasons
Yeah.
why.
We
And it
can't
could
read
be
minds yet.
right, and it might have nothing to do with you. It's not that they don't
Mhm.
wanna give you that. It's that they're in a headspace where maybe they're distracted by something that's going on at work. Maybe they're just not considering that right now, and they're thinking it in their head, but saying it out loud is just a bridge too far. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that waiting for the other person to take the first step is just wasted time.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And
Mm,
that's really common. I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about of like supporting each other's goals and all of that, appreciations, all of that kind of goes out the window when there's a baby involved and we're sleep deprived and feeling resentful. And especially if there's problems with feeding and sleeping, if there's a colicky baby.
yeah.
Um, and so, especially important to have some of these conversations beforehand.
Mhm,
Really
mhm.
start to create those new patterns of communication. I love that. It is a new language. And
Yeah,
especially if we've not received that from our primary caregivers. If we don't receive it, then how are we supposed to all of a sudden just acquire it? We need
right.
additional support.
Do you remember, like, for your kids, I remember thinking when when we got through the initial baby phase and he was sleeping alone through the night, and I was like, "We're freaking awesome. This is great." And then we hit 2, and everyone was just like, "The 2s are the worst." We got through 2, he was easy. I was like, "We're freaking awesome. Like, our kid is amazing. We're amazing." And then
Yeah.
we hit 3, and I was just like, oh my God, I think there is a spirit that has taken over my child. And it
Hmm.
was this unexpected, like, you hear of the toddler terrible, whatever.
Hmm.
But in a way, it was like going back to being new parents, where we were like, we have no idea what we're doing, how to do this. It's not working. None of the books and the articles are helping. And so I think sometimes as parents, we forget that every stage is a new stage for us because
Yeah.
we've never done this before. And so
Mhm.
it's like the bringing newborn home. It's a different kind of sleep loss. It may not be sleep deprivation because your baby's waking up all night. It might be because maybe you have a sleep regression, or maybe because you have a behavioral issue and the kid is not maybe sleeping in bed, maybe waking up too early. Maybe you're just overwhelmed and you can't sleep right because you can't shut your mind off. And
Yeah.
so, to your point, these conversations have to happen and we have to keep having them because we're constantly going through these new stages as
Mm.
parents. And you might have gone through a stage with your first kid and your kid, you know, developed very differently than your second kid. So don't think that just because you've had one that it's going to be easy. Like, we have to tailor to some extent our parenting to this
Mhm.
individual human
Yeah.
that is trying to live a life as well. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, and even with every stage of your child, we have stages within ourselves of those trigger things that pop up. I had a conversation with my husband this morning after we dropped our kids off at school about how we appreciate each other for kind of keeping ourselves in check. My husband and I were both the youngest sibling, and so we have that we've broken or we are currently breaking apart from the people pleasing aspect that that we naturally fall into. But we also have this inner child in us that like never got to fully use her voice and never got to like really be who that person is. And so sometimes that can like showcase in a way with our kids that are not maybe not the best and can trigger each other. And so we continue to have these conversations as our oldest, who is very spicy, gets older and, has her own, like, no, I'm doing it this way, which is fantastic. as a
Mhm.
human and as a future woman, but it's really hard to raise as a parent.
Yes.
But keeping each other in check of like, this is how I can support you. This is how you can support me. Um, yeah, those conversations don't just stop. You don't just go to couples therapy for a period of time. You're like, okay, poof, we're done. We're perfect. We're golden.
Yeah, like you said, with the car, you gotta get routine maintenance, like, it
Yes.
does not stop, and I guess it depends on your goal for your marriage, right? Like, I don't wanna
Mhm.
have a mediocre marriage, I wanna have a great marriage, and that means I have to put a great amount of work into it, but not work in the sense of like, "Oh my god, this is so much work," but effort, like, just it matters, and if the thing that matters is the thing I'm gonna invest in. If I like you said, if you wanna save up for a vacation, well, you can only do that if you put money aside. If you don't spend it on this thing over here because you're saving it for something over here, and it's the same with energy. If I use up all my good energy for the people outside my home, and I
Mhm.
come home and I just have what's left over, and
Right.
that's constantly what I give my family, then I'm going to get that back. I'm going to have less engaged family members and a less connected relationship with my children and with my spouse. And like you said earlier, the kids deserve the best gift we can give them is not just that we're connected because it gives them more stability and happiness and joy, but it teaches them. Because unfortunately, so many people can look back and say, I didn't have a great example of what a strong marriage should look like. And I would be devastated if my child ever thought that of
Mm.
me and my husband. Like, we're not perfect. We will never be perfect. But I want him to be able to say, but my parents, they loved each other. They had fun together. They were really a good team. They never fought in
Mhm.
front of me. They didn't yell at me. They didn't yell at each other. Like the stuff that matters,
Mhm.
I want to live that life so that he can live that life too.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really funny. I have when my kids go to visit certain family members, they always come back and they're like, gosh, they like fight all of the time. They don't fight all the time, but their like threshold of what fighting is like totally
Mhm.
we feel really good about. And they'll say like, you and daddy never fight. And I was like, no, we do have our moments. We just like don't make snide comments at each other, or like make passive
Mm.
aggressive comments or like scream and yell. And I know there are a lot of couples out there that feel really nervous about having conflict in front of their kids, but really, like sometimes that can be very beneficial
Yep.
because if you're doing it in a way that feels respectful and loving and sustainable, then your kids are going to see that and they're going to take that language and they're going to use it in their relationships of like,
Mm.
oh, because they are going to have conflict and they need to
Yeah.
know how to resolve it as well.
Right. Yeah, because I think that also sets kids up to know that that's normal. Like there are a lot of kids
Yeah.
who grow up where their parents never showed them conflict and then they're getting divorced all of a sudden. And it's like, "Oh my god. So now
Hmm.
all relationships are unsafe because my parents never fought and they got a divorce. So how can I ever have a successful relationship kind of thing?" So, I am mindful of our time. There's something I really want to talk
Yeah.
about before we go, but to wrap up our topic before I move into that, I think our takeaway is because a lot of my listeners already have the baby.
Hmm.
I think that it's really, I want that takeaway, and I'll let you kind of have the last word on this, but I want that takeaway to be it's never too late to create plans. It's never too late to set goals. You have to make time for that. And I don't want anyone to be discouraged that, well, we didn't do this before we had these kids. And so how are we going to get there? So give us kind of like a good wrap up for what do we really want that takeaway to be? I know pressure's on, girl.
I know. It's just that if you really sit down and reflect on your life and the future of what that looks like, it's so worth it to be happy and feel loved. And even if you have conflict, like to be able to get through it together, feeling like a team. I think so often we just feel like we might be at ends with our partner. The more that we feel on the same page and same team, you can tackle it together, right? It's you against the world. And
Yep.
so even if you feel like it's too late, if you want to have a better relationship, if your partner wants to have a better relationship, it's not too late.
Yeah. I love it. Yay. Okay. So you need to tell us about a really cool thing that you do. So, you have a podcast
Yes.
and you are not a solo host. Tell us about your podcast, Miranda.
Yes. So my husband and I host the Love After Lullabies podcast, and it is us having real conversations with couples, all walks of life, all ages of kids that they have, and talking about their relationship, priorities that they have, struggles, challenges, things that they've noticed change, after having kids. It's really laid back. It's fun. It can be, a little spicy at times. We also have some episodes of, experts in the field, some bonus episodes. I've got one coming out this week about a woman in town who creates these like really adorable postpartum boxes for moms filled with all kinds of goodies. So it's a wide range of things, but it's really fun.
I
So
love that. Okay,
yeah.
so my listeners are going to get to experience some of this because we're going to have another episode we're going to record together, but your husband's going to join and then
Yeah.
I get to interview. You're used to interviewing the people. I get to interview you. This is going to be so much fun. And for all the people that saw my 100th with my husband, Rich, you know that I had to like beg him to do that with me and he was super trooper. But I'm trying to convince him, Miranda, to do our episode where him and I come on your show.
Yes.
He's in the no camp right now. I've got to work him into that. So maybe when he watches the episode with you and your hubby on my podcast, we can convince him. So it's going
Yeah.
to be fun. Okay, so Love After Lullabies is the name of your podcast. I will share the link to that in the show notes. And then where else do you have like is that the best place for people to find you? Do you have a social media people can follow you on?
Yeah, I do have a social media, mostly on Instagram. So we've got our podcast one, Love After Lullabies. I also have my professional one that I need to be more active on, but there are the things that are on there are good tips. And that's
Okay.
just Miranda Clark LPC.
I will link to that as well. Miranda, this was so much fun. Thank
This
you
was
so
really
much for
fun.
doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
love like
go
therapy,
ahead.
couples therapy nerding out with you.
Heck yeah, girl. And I told you we're just going to be best friends now. It's fine.
Yeah.
So we'll schedule the next one. So everyone needs to stay tuned because your husband, from the bits that I've seen on your podcast, he's fun. This is going
Yeah,
to be a lot of fun.
he adds some levities to some things.
Yes.
So
And he's nowhere, like he's not in any of like anything related to the therapy or counseling
right.
field.
Yes,
So
correct.
everyone will have to stay tuned to see what he's bringing to the table. It's going to be fun. All right. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks,
All
Navarre.
right. Bye.